Hello, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. It's me, Charmaine. Welcome to the Navigating Naps digital class. I am so excited that you are here because I know for many of my followers, nailing naps is the bane of your life. So if you're here, it is my job to make your life a little bit easier when it comes to navigating naps and help your baby to become a sound little sleeper. So if you're here, it's probably because you're exhausted and you suspect that your little one is tired too, but sleep just won't freaking happen. And you know for sure that they're tired. You know because they're clingy, they're cranky, and they're clinging to you like hell, and they're crying. So why the heck won't they just go to sleep? Well, I'm going to explain all that to you and more in a second. So in today's class, we are going to be covering naps, why our kids need them, and why they're so challenging to get right. We're going to be looking at the purpose of naps, why naps are so important, and why they can be so challenging to get our kids to take them. We're going to be looking at nap requirements across the early years. So whether you have a newborn or a 3-year-old, you're going to know exactly how much nap time they're going to need during the day. And you're also going to know when they need it. So we'll be looking at how to create a daily routine that flows and helps your little one to take naps at the right time when they need them. We're going to be looking at when and for how long and where your little one should be napping. We're going to be looking at how you can get your little one to nap well and predictably. And then there's going to be a what to do if section to help you to salvage naps and just make better headway with them. So if you are here now, I'm willing to bet money on the fact that one of these issues is something that you might be experiencing. And naps can be notoriously challenging for some parents. It's even challenging for me sometimes. And I've been working with children both day and night for over 20 years. Naps can be really difficult to get right unless you know some of the things that I'm about to share with you. So if you have a little one who is doing short naps, they might be napping for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Bizarrely, that's actually not a bad thing. I'm going to be explaining more about that later. But if this is something that you're really struggling with and you want help to work out why it's happening and to move forward, stay tuned. So if your child is skipping the occasional nap and you're wondering what the hell, you're in the right place. If your child is refusing naps altogether, you're in the right place. If you're having a difficult time with when your child should be napping, so they might be napping quite well in the day, you might find getting them down to naps is quite easy, but you're not sure how long they should be napping for. Are they napping too much in the morning, napping too much too close to bedtime? Because sometimes if you don't distribute the sleep and the nap time in the daytime the right way, it can actually make nighttime sleep a lot more challenging. So I'm going to be showing you when your little one should be napping and for how long. And then this can also help you if you're struggling with knowing when to drop naps, nap transitions. So if your baby has gone from sort of 4 or 5 naps in a day and they're trying to drop them down when they get to 6 months to maybe 3, or maybe they might be sort of 9 months now and they might be trying to drop that 3 nap down to having just 2 naps, or you might have a toddler who was napping twice in a day and now they're making it very clear that they only need 1 nap or that they don't need any naps at all. So if this is you, I'm super glad that you're here because we're going to be covering all of that in today's class. So why do our little ones need to nap? Why are naps such a thing that we are pulling our hair out over? So, to cut a long story short and to give you the concise answer, naps allow children to rest and re-energize throughout the day. We all know what kids look like when they haven't had a nap. They're tired, they're cranky, they're irritable, they have meltdowns over the littlest of things, and parenting them is just not much fun. And also, nap times give us parents an opportunity to get, a little bit of break during the day. The younger your kids are, the more parenting that you're going to have to do with them. And that can get really freaking tiring. So sometimes, having a child that naps well and predictably, it gives us a little bit of mean time. It gives us a little bit of downtime. And it gives us the opportunity to get some of the other things in the day that we need to get done. Now, I have a online mentor, somebody who I go to when I'm really struggling with sleep, somebody who I ask for advice and support. She's created many a course on sleep training. She's written a book. She's a lactation consultant. She's brilliant. Her name is Lindsay Hookway. And in her book, she basically breaks down the function of naps to be that from a practical standpoint, naps are there to minimize the stress response caused by increased sleep pressure that builds during the hours of wakefulness. So basically, naps are there to take away the stress of an overtired child when they've been awake for too long during the day. So we're going to cover more on that in a minute. So the purpose of naps, from a more scientific and from a baby sleep expert, naps help our little ones by preventing overtiredness. Now, if you're not familiar with why overtiredness can cause a problem, I'm going to cover more on that in a minute. It prevents overtiredness, and it reduces the drive to sleep. It reduces sleep pressure and reduces cortisol levels. Now, I don't know if you've heard this before, but sleep pressure is basically what builds during the day. It's basically the drive to sleep that we all feel. Now, we're adults, so our drive to sleep can take a long time to build. We wake up in the day, we don't need to nap, although some of us, me included, putting my hands up here, sometimes do benefit from the odd cat nap during the day. But on the whole, most adults don't need to sleep during the day. We don't need daytime naps. So we'll get up in the morning, and as we go about our day, expending energy, using our limbs and whatever, the drive to sleep increases. And when we get to the end of the day, that drive to sleep gets so high that we will start preparing ourselves for bed and put ourselves to sleep. Now, with our little ones, with our children, their drive to sleep builds much quicker than us, which is why they need to nap. Now, we often, parents who don't understand the negative impact that overtiredness can have on kids, often think, okay, well, the longer they're awake, the more tired they'll be, and therefore the better they'll sleep. Now, a lot of parents don't know and understand that there's something that our bodies do to help our little ones cope with being awake for too long. Now, with us, our stress levels tend to rise, and our cortisol levels rise too. With our babies, because their drive to sleep builds so much more quicker, the body basically releases hormones to help them to cope with being awake longer than they should have been. So these hormones are cortisol and adrenaline. Now, we all know adrenaline very well. It's the fight or flight hormone, and I like to say to parents that when our child gets to the point of being overtired and cortisol and adrenaline is released, it means they fight sleep and they run away from sleep. They fight or flight from it. Cortisol as well, which you might recognize as the stress hormone, it's great for us in that cortisol is good for us. We need cortisol to help us to stay alert. However, when cortisol is released as a coping mechanism of being overtired, cortisol kind of acts like coffee in our system, in that the levels of it build up and accumulate over time. And unfortunately, it doesn't stop us from feeling tired, but it acts like coffee in that it makes getting to sleep that much more difficult. You will know what it's like when you've had a late night and you think, okay, right, I've had a late night, I've got work the next day, I'm going to drink copious amounts of coffee to help us to cope with being awake. And then you get to the end of the day, and when you're ready to sleep, you've got all this caffeine in your system that makes getting to sleep really, really hard. And that's basically what cortisol kind of acts like in the systems of our little ones. It makes getting to sleep much trickier for them. So I'm going to be talking about how you can alleviate those cortisol levels in a little bit, but I want to just talk a little bit more about the purpose of naps here. So as I mentioned before, naps help to reduce the cortisol levels during the day. So napping actually helps to prevent and minimize overtiredness. But if our little ones don't get the nap at the right time, their cortisol levels will rise. Also, the purpose of naps is that it improves memory, performance and mood. We all know that our kids are much happier once they've had a sleep. It improves concentration and cognition. And there's actually a scientific paper that has found that in preschoolers who still nap, it actually enhances and helps with learning. So if you have a preschooler or a child that has started school early and you find that they are sort of doing half days and coming home from school needing to nap, and you're thinking, oh my God, what's going on? Actually, it might be a sign of a good thing. These naps are there to help and to facilitate learning, and it actually encourages and solidifies the learning that your child has experienced. So that's something that can really be helpful for you if you have a child who didn't nap before they went to school and now they've started napping. So why is getting your child to sleep in the day so freaking hard? Well, it's daytime. It's daylight. Now, when your child's body matures and their body clock matures and their circadian rhythmicity, sorry, I always get tongue-tied when I say that, their circadian rhythmicity is set, i.e. they get used to being awake and asleep at certain times. Their circadian rhythm is governed by cortisol, which is what I mentioned earlier, and melatonin. Now, during the day, there's lots of daylight, but at night, obviously, but at night, as the evening comes in and darkness sets in, if your baby has a mature circadian rhythm, with the dimming of the light, melatonin can occur. Now, melatonin, as you may or may not know, is referred to as the sleepy hormone. Its onset is brought on by dimming of light, and basically it helps our little ones to feel sleepy. It doesn't make them sleep, but it helps them to feel sleepy. So when it's the evening, when it's nighttime, getting them to sleep is so much easier because the melatonin has kicked in, it's dark, and so they've had a chemical incentive to help them to fall asleep. During the day, there is no darkness, and so that chemical incentive to nod off just isn't there. So a lot of the time, I will say to parents, it does help to have a darkened room to facilitate naps, but this is not really so much to facilitate the melatonin. It's more so to help your little one recognize we're going to sleep, it's nighttime. Well, it's not nighttime, but we're going to sleep, and we want to kind of create the same atmosphere that we do at nighttime to encourage sleep to happen. Also, another reason why little ones can find napping really really difficult is the overtiredness that I mentioned before. With overtiredness and the release of extra cortisol and adrenaline, with this hormones flying around your little one's system, it can make getting to sleep really, really difficult for them. Once they get to sleep, if they are overtired, it could cause a hypnic jerk. A hypnic jerk is basically where a child experiences the feelings of falling and they jerk awake. So sometimes we experience it when we're overtired. We nod off, and then as we're nodding off, we get that feeling that we're falling, and so we jerk ourselves awake. Our little ones do that too. So sometimes if you find that your little one is jerking awake sort of 10-15 minutes after they've gone down to sleep, it's sometimes a sign that they're overtired and that they need help to get back to sleep. So overtiredness can impact sleep, and it makes sleep difficult for them to fall into. It can sometimes impact the quality of sleep that they have, so it can sometimes cause frequent wake-ups, and it can also cause early waking from naps, early waking at night, and sometimes nap refusal altogether. Sometimes getting our sleep children to nap in the day is really difficult because that particular child just has a low sleep quota. We all have that one friend, we all know somebody who has a kid who just doesn't nap in the day, but yet they still sleep really, really well at night. And you would think, oh my God, that child must be really overtired. They're not going to get the sleep that they need. But there are just some children out there who are rare, who just have a low sleep quota, have a low sleep need, and just don't need as much sleep as their counterparts. And so keeping a diary and keeping a note of how much sleep your child needs or how much sleep your child is getting can be super useful. You know, so you might find that you have one of those rare children who just doesn't need much sleep in the day. As I said, it is rare, but it does happen. Another potential reason why your little one will struggle with having predictable naps is because they're just too young. So I don't know if you've been following me for a while. I will often talk about the 4-month sleep regression. Basically, the 4-month sleep regression doesn't just happen at 4 months. It can happen at any time between 2 and 6 months. And it's not even really a regression. It's more of a permanent change in how your baby sleeps. And a lot of the time, it's when your baby's circadian rhythmicity is matured. So it means that the child's body understands the difference between day and night and kind of encourages and facilitates that. It also means that if your child isn't napping predictably, usually these are children that are under 6 months of age, it's completely normal. It could mean that the 4-month regression hasn't happened yet. Sorry, I shouldn't refer to it as the 4-month regression, but it's kind of what it's generally known as. It can happen at any time between 2 and 6 months. But if this is your child, if your child is below 6 months and you're finding that getting them down to nap predictably is a struggle, it's probably not your fault. Their brain has probably not matured enough yet. And you'll often find that by the time they get to 6 months and that brain maturity has happened, circadian rhythmicity has been achieved, you'll probably find that naps will consolidate and get a little bit longer and become a lot more predictable. Another reason why your child may refuse to nap or might struggle with naps is that their nap needs have changed. I often say to parents, naps are temporary. They're something that they're only going to need at the early end of childhood. And as they grow and get bigger, the amount of sleep that they need in the day is going to change. Sometimes it can literally change overnight. It might feel like, you know, your 7-month-old baby needed 3 naps yesterday. All of a sudden they turn 8 months and now they are just refusing that 3rd afternoon nap. And it's okay if they're getting all of the sleep needs that they met in the first 2 naps of the day. It just might mean that that last nap of the day needs to be dropped, and those 2 other naps that they have in the day might need to be adjusted, the timings of which might need to be adjusted. Another reason why your child might find it really hard to nap in the day is because of accidental napping or nap disruption. So this is something you might experience if you've got older siblings that you need to get to school, or if you're running errands. Sometimes, you know, you'll put your kids in the car and, you know, quick trip in the car seat or in the sling, they have a quick snooze for 15 minutes. And sometimes that little 15-minute window of sleep is enough to kind of throw the rest of the naps out of the day. It's normal, it happens. So, you know, please don't panic if this is it. I'm going to explain to you how you can help to avoid that, or how you can facilitate naps on the go. And sometimes naps are difficult to get to grips with because parents are confused about how you should be getting your kids down to nap. You know, some parents have been doing like the 2-3-4 method, where, you know, you'll have wake windows or awake intervals where your child is awake for 2 hours at a time, and then you'll settle them for a nap, and then they'll be awake for 3 hours, and then you'll settle them for a nap, and then they'll be awake for 4 hours, and then you'll settle them for a nap. That 2-3-4 method might work really, really well with a 9-month-old, but it's not going to work with a newborn. There are other baby sleep experts who say that, you know, an awake window or an awake interval is just 90 minutes long, and that, you know, after every 90-minute cycle of being awake, you need to settle your child down for a nap. Again, it is not bad advice. If you've got a 4-month-old, then a 90-minute wake window is perfect. If you've got a newborn, it's not going to work. If you've got a 12-month-old, you just try getting your 12-month-old to nap after 90 minutes of being awake. It might work for the early morning nap. It may not work for the rest of the day. So it's important that you try not to Google what your little one should be doing, because sometimes you'll be reading the wrong advice for a child's nap requirements of your age. So that's why I created this class, to kind of help you understand when your child needs to nap according to their age and stage of development. So I have an action point for you. Over the next couple of days, before you start trying to tackle when your baby is napping and solving the nap trouble that you're experiencing, I would really like it if you could, over the next couple of days, keep a diary or a log of when your baby is sleeping and for how long. So when they're going down to bed at night, if they're going down at 7:30 and they're waking up again at 10 o'clock, write that down. The reason why I'm asking you to do this is because we want to find out if your baby is overtired or not. If perhaps the distribution of sleep that they're getting in a 24-hour period might need rejigging. We want to see if there is a sleep debt that's occurring, or if your baby might be overtired or undertired at the times that you're trying to get them to nap. And the only way we're going to know this is if we're getting an accurate picture of how much sleep your child is getting. So for the next couple of days, I want you to write down morning naps, afternoon naps, cat naps, whatever. And then I want you to calculate at the end of the day how much sleep your child is getting. Now, this chart that I have here, I got it from the National Society of Sleep, the British Society of Sleep, and this is basically the age range, or the range of sleep needed across the lifespan. So as you can see, it goes from 0 right up to 65 years of age. I know we're not trying to get a 65-year-old to nap, but I thought this would be really good to kind of show you just how much sleep needs change and need adjusting in the first few years of life compared to the rest of the lifespan. So as you can see, a newborn baby, they don't know how many naps that a newborn baby is going to have. It's completely sporadic. The amount of daytime sleep that they're going to have is going to be sporadic. So is the amount of nighttime sleep, because newborn babies do not have mature brains. Their circadian rhythm isn't mature. So their sleep distribution of a 24-hour period is going to be all over the place. And as you can see, they need a total of up to 17, even 18 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. And that's going to happen little and often. As you can see, as the child gets older, between 3 to 6 months, they need 4 naps in the day. And as you can see, it also gives you a total amount of sleep in the day as well. So Keep a log of when your baby is sleeping and compare it to this table. You know, is your child getting the amount of sleep overnight that they need? Are they getting the amount of sleep in the daytime that they need? Is there a sleep debt occurring perhaps? Are they getting too much sleep? Now, I don't want you to tie yourself up too much with sleep totals, because these totals here are a guideline. Some children are going to have less sleep than that. Some children are going to need more sleep than that. These are just guidelines to kind of help you gauge whether or not your child is getting the sleep that they need. So, as I mentioned before, timing is everything, and I spoke about sleep pressure. So I'm just going to speak about it a little bit again, because I want to kind of explain awake windows and awake periods so that you can get a better understanding of when your child needs to nap. So think about yourself as an adult and when you sleep. So sleep is something that you normally do at the end of the day. You wake up in the morning, you live your life, you might go to work, to school or college, out with friends, go to a bar, or do whatever. But after a long and busy day, you're going to get to the end of the day and you're going to come home and you feel tired. And that's because you've used up all the energy or the fuel that sleep has given you from the night before. So now it's time to re-energize and snooze and get yourself ready for another busy day tomorrow. But with our babies and our toddlers, they function in exactly the same way, but their sleep pressure builds a lot quicker than ours does. Sometimes, like with newborns, they can get tired in as little as half an hour. So it's really, really important for you as a mum to understand how quickly your little one is going to need or how quickly your little one is going to need to rest before... I'm just getting tongue-tied. It's really important, as I said, for you to gauge how long that your little one has been awake for. Because if they are getting cranky and clingy and fussy, you might realise, well, actually, their awake window or their awake period that they've come to is coming to an end. They're actually really, really tired, and now is the ideal time to get them down to sleep. So I have found this wonderful table in the brilliant book by Alexis Dubois. I think I said that right, called Precious Little Sleep. And this is where she basically has created a table of the average awake windows according to a child's age. So in the previous table, it gave you the total amount of sleep that a person needed in the 24-hour period. And in this table here, I've kind of given you a breakdown of how long your child needs to be awake for before they get tired and will probably need to nap again. Now, as you can see, for a baby that is less than 6 weeks old, the awake interval can be as small as 30 minutes, but it can last as long as an hour. Now, it's important that I remind you or let you know that as your baby's day progresses, the awake window or the awake interval gets longer. So what you'll often find is that from the first wake up in the morning, your little one will get tired extremely quickly. Probably, like I said, if it's newborn, in 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour. After that first initial sleep, that awake window gets a little bit longer. So as the day progresses, you will find that the beginning of the day, the wake window is at the shorter end of the average. And as the day progresses and gets to the end of the day, the wider aspect of the awake window is what you should be focusing on. So for example, with a 4-month-old, in the morning, they might get tired as quickly as after an hour, whereas by the end of the day and after some successful naps, you might find that between 5 and 7 they are happy to be awake for a good 2 hours before they go to bed. So please do bear that in mind. I've also added in here the average nap durations according to age of the child as well. So like I said, if you've got a little one, they're going to get very tired very, very quickly. They may nap for as little as 15 minutes. They may nap up to 4 hours. What I would say is if you do have a little one who is older than 3 months old and they're napping for more than 2 hours, you want to wake them. If they're napping for too long in the day, it can have an impact on their nighttime sleep. So if your little one has been asleep for 2 hours, unless it's the middle of the day nap, they're older than 6 months, you really ideally need to be waking them up, ready to feed, ready for their next activity, ready for the rest of the day. Because if they're napping too long in the day, it's going to impact their nighttime sleep. So, I think I jumped ahead a little bit too quickly there. There's the cheat sheet there for older toddlers, older babies and toddlers there. So you can see with a 9 to 12-month-old, their awake window could be as short as 2 hours in the morning, but by the end of the day, it could be as long as 4 hours. And their nap durations are a lot shorter. They'll probably only need to nap for up to 2 hours at a time. As you can see here, I've done two different time slots for children aged 12 to 18 months, because there are some 12 to 18 month olds that will nap twice in a day, and there are others that will nap once a day. So I've put that in there to help you guys with that. But please do remember, these are just guidelines, they're averages. Your child might be a little bit different, so it's really, really useful to keep a journal of tired cues, or how long your baby's been awake. And if you do notice that your little one is getting tired a lot earlier than a wake window, especially in the morning, there is no harm in settling them a little bit earlier. Remember, these are just averages. Your child's wake window might be a little bit longer than that. It might be a little bit shorter. So these are some quick nap wins that I want to share with you. I say they're nap quick wins. They're not really quick wins at all. But these are things that you can do outside of sleep that can really have a massive impact and a huge improvement in the way that your baby sleeps. So the first one is to expose your baby to broad spectrum daylight as early in the day as you possibly can. So allowing your child to be exposed to natural daylight is really, really useful, especially if they're under 6 months old. The reason being is because at this point that their circadian rhythmicity is not set yet. So if you're exposing them to broad spectrum daylight at least twice in a day, as early as possible in the day as well, this really does help to set the body clock. It helps the body clock to recognize it's the daytime now, so we need to distribute appropriate levels of cortisol to encourage alertness, and this again helps to set the body clock. In the evenings, something that you can do to help to encourage circadian rhythmicity is to reduce the light intensity as the evening progresses. So if it's the summertime and it's coming up to bedtime, you might lower the lights in the house, or you might start drawing the curtains in the household to kind of signify to your little one the evening is coming. If it is winter and it's getting dark, you might just rely on the natural daylight outside and, you know, allow the natural darkness that's occurring to encourage some darkness in the evenings. So remember what I mentioned earlier about melatonin and cortisol being what sets the circadian rhythm. So the cortisol is released during the day and the melatonin is released as darkness comes on. So the onset of darkness encourages that release of melatonin, which is the sleepy hormone. So this is why getting to sleep in the day is a lot trickier for you to settle your baby in the day, because there is that chemical incentive to get to sleep just isn't there. So even if you do make the room darker, the melatonin onset is unlikely to occur, but still have the room dark there, or still make the environment darker so that you can help your baby recognize it's time for sleep. It's really important that you create a pre-nap routine, which is just a miniature version of your bedtime routine, and you do it at every possible opportunity that you want your child to nap. Having a pre-nap routine is super, super useful. Remember, with our kids, predictability is everything. It helps them to feel secure. It helps them to relax. So if you have got a fussy, cranky, irritable little one and you start your pre-nap routine, you might find that the more you do it, the quicker they calm down once you start doing it, because they recognize that you're helping them to settle to sleep. It's really, really useful to have a pre-nap routine, and it doesn't need to be anything long-winded. It's just a miniature version of your bedtime routine. So it could be something as simple as washing hands, reading a story, singing a lullaby, having a feed, and then going down to bed. But if you do it in the same order with the same components every time you want to settle them to sleep, it will become something that your child will recognize. Another quick win that I wanted to mention is if you're really struggling with where to settle your child to sleep, or you're worrying about self-settling, put that on the back burner and focus on getting the timings of your naps right. If you can get the timing of the nap right, and you can get it right for a couple of days, for a couple of weeks, you'll find that where they're napping is really unimportant, because as long as they're getting the sleep that they need, then that's great. It's a lot easier to be fluid with the location of the nap when your child is under 6 months. So for example, it's a lot easier to nap on the go when your little one is under 6 months. They're a lot smaller. You could probably put them in a sling. So if this is something that you're really struggling with, if you're finding your baby is not napping well in their cot, but they'll nap well in the buggy, prioritize the timing of the nap over the location. Once you get the timing right, then work on the place where you want them to nap. Sometimes I think it's important to kind of work on things one step at a time. Once you've got the timing of the nap right and they're overtired, they're not overtired, they're getting the sleep that they need, you can then work on helping them to self-settle or where it is that you want them to sleep. So on top of that as well, I think it's really important for me to add that if your little one is weaned and they're on solids, having their meals at regular, consistent times every day is a great way of helping to set the body clock. Setting the body clock, setting the circadian rhythm is a great way of making naps and daytime and nighttime sleep a lot more predictable. And the best way to do that is to have your meals at regular, predictable times. I'm not talking about the milk, I'm talking about the breakfast meal, the lunch meal and the dinner meal. You need to be having them at roughly the same time every day because, again, like I said, it sets the body clock. And also it's really, really important as well that bedtimes and wake up times are happening around about the same time every day. I have to say to parents, anything that happens after 7 p.m. and before 7 a.m. is nighttime. And I'll say to parents as well, if you're dealing with wake ups in the night, be as boring as you possibly can because it's nighttime and you need to let your little one know. So between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. it's nighttime, keep it dark. When it gets to the morning time, 7 a.m, you turn the lights on, activity happens, and you start and you end your day at roughly the same time. So sometimes it'll be 7, sometimes it'll be 7:30, sometimes it might even be 8. But as long as it kind of happens around about the same time every day, that's how you can encourage that circadian rhythmicity to mature. If it's happening at sporadic times every day, you know, sometimes wake ups at 7, sometimes wake ups at 9, sometimes bedtimes at 9, or sometimes bedtimes at 7, it's not only confusing for your child, but it's confusing for your child's body clock as well. It's almost like the body clock doesn't know what's going on, and it just makes the day a lot more difficult. Lastly, I think it's really important that I add this as well, is that you need to ensure your little one is getting plenty of exercise and is given plenty of opportunities for the activity. So you cannot get your child to be active enough. And I'm not talking just about toddlers, I'm talking about babies too. Give them tummy time, which I often refer to as baby's first workout. It strengthens their limbs, it gets them active. When children are having tummy time, when non-mobile children are having tummy time, it gives them the opportunity to strengthen their upper arm muscles, their leg muscles if they're trying to crawl. It's good for helping them to use their limbs. So if you have a non-mobile baby, provide opportunities and activities for them where they can use their whole bodies and expend as much energy as they possibly can. This is really useful, not only to help them sleep, but also if they're overtired, it helps to release any built up cortisol that builds up in their system. Remember, when they're overtired, cortisol will get released as a stress response. So the body basically thinks, we're stressed, we need to help to deal with this. It releases cortisol to help to deal with that stress, and cortisol has a cumulative effect. So the more overtired your child gets, the more cortisol that's released, and the more cortisol that's flying around your child's system, the more difficult they're going to find it to get to sleep, and the more difficult they're going to find it to stay asleep. And you'll find that they're much more prone to early wake ups in the morning and premature wake ups from naps. So getting them active and having them active is not only great for wearing them out, it's great for eliminating the causes of overtiredness as well. It's also really important that when you are providing your little ones with the opportunity to be active, you're doing it at the right time. So you want to be doing that at the time of day when they are the most alert. So literally as they're waking up from their nap, some little ones will be waking up for a milk feed or to have lunch or whatever. Give them the opportunity to be active. And then if they are being active, right before nap time, you want to give them the opportunity to wind down. So give them an opportunity to be active, and then implement your pre-nap ritual to help them to wind down for sleep. So now you know why they found it really, really hard to nap. Now we're going to go about preparing them for nap times and all the things that you need to know to help make naps a success. So before we start working on getting your little one napping at ideal times, we want to do some preparation first. This class is definitely what I would call preparation. Also, you want to make sure that you're keeping your journals as well. So I think it's really important that you manage your expectations and know what normal napping looks like for a child of your child's age. So expecting your newborn to have a 3-4 hour nap is probably not outside the realms of possibility, but expecting a 9-month-old to have a 3-4 hour nap is not, it's just not what you would expect. So it's really important that you understand what it is that your little one should be doing nap-wise for your little one's age. I'm going to be going over what normal napping should be looking like for a child of your, for a a child of your child's age in the next few minutes. 2, you want to plan your pre-nap ritual if you don't have one already. So think about your bedtime routine. What can you take out of that, i.e. bath, that can minimise that? Not minimise that, but what can you take out of the bedtime routine to create a pre-nap routine? So I often say take the bath out and leave everything else in it. But it's completely up to you what you include in your pre-nap ritual. But it is really important that once you have your pre-nap ritual in place, that you do it every single time you want your child to nap. That is vitally important. It's an anchor, if you like, and something they'll become used to. And when they are tired and cranky and fussy and wanting to nap, once you start doing the pre-nap routine and ritual, they'll recognize, sleep's coming, and it should make your child feel a little bit more secure and a little bit more relaxed. Also, plan your daily routine. So as I said before, you want to be exposing your child to broad spectrum daylight during the day. You want to get them out of the house. So have a look at your daily routine. When do you want them to nap? When do you want to get them out of the house? When do you want to run your errands? You might decide, well, actually, I know my child naps really, really well when I put them in the buggy. So plan to run your errands around that time. Put them in the buggy so you know they'll nap well and go and run your errands. If you plan your day ahead, it's a lot easier to salvage naps when they're going awry. Or if you know, for example, that a nap is going to go out of the window, you know, okay, well, my child's going to be cranky and fussy on this particular day. So I know that if they don't get their early morning nap, if I take them out in the afternoon, give them a good run around, a good play, help them to expend that energy, I can get them to nap sort of maybe 10, 15 minutes a little bit earlier for their lunchtime nap and help to eliminate some of the problems that not having the earlier nap might have caused. So it's really, really useful to try and plan your day ahead. I know you're not always going to be able to do this, but if you know you've got appointments or if you know you've got things that you need to incorporate, try and plan your day around them. I mentioned this before, but keeping a diary is really, really important. It can help you to identify if there's a sleep debt, because I know a lot of the time we actually think, oh my God, our kids aren't napping well, they're not sleeping well, and then we'll actually write down what they've been doing over a period of days, and you look back and you think, well, actually, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Things aren't as awful as I anticipated, and sometimes you'll actually find that it just takes little tweaks here and there to improve things. So keeping a journal or a diary is really, really important because it helps you to really understand what's going on. If you're anything like me, when you're sleep deprived, remembering anything is a freaking nightmare anyway. And a lot of the times how you think you remember things is not exactly how they are. So it's important to keep a journal so that you can recognize, is the child overtired? It's also really good as well if you're trying to identify any early sleep cues, because I often say to parents, if you're having a hard time figuring out when to nap them, if you don't know how long their awake window is, look out for the sleep cues. Are there any sleep cues that you might have missed? Because crying and yawning are the later cues. So sometimes things like sudden loss of interest in an activity, avoiding your gaze, eye rubbing, ear pulling, some of the things that they are doing are actually early cues that they're tired that you might not have noticed. So as you're going over the next couple of days, whereas you're paying attention to awake windows and all that good stuff, see if you're noticing things that are happening habitually before they're getting tired or before they're crying out of tiredness. See if you can recognize those early cues, because if you see those early cues and maybe help to start winding down earlier on, before they get overtired, you might find that settling them to sleep is a lot easier than you realize. And also 4, it's really important that you take care of yourself as well. Look out for yourself, especially if you're really, really tired overnight. So sometimes I say to parents, if you're struggling with sorting out naps in the day, and sleep is kind of gone out of the window for you at night as well, and you're not averse to co-sleeping, co-sleep for some of your naps. A lot of the time, co-sleeping for naps can actually facilitate a better nap, especially if your little one is has a hard time self-settling, or you're finding that they wake up as soon as they're away from you. Co-sleeping is a great way to ensure that the nap is happening at the right time, B, for the right duration, and it means that you get some sleep too as well. So it's important that you take care of yourself throughout this process. So, so I wanted to talk about managing your expectations as across the lifespan. So we've talked about how much sleep your child we should be getting according to their age and stage of development. But I also want you to understand how naps work according to age and stage of development as well. So you might find that if your child is under 6 months, napping is really, really unpredictable and it's hard to set to a routine. And you know what? This is okay. This is actually okay and it's normal, especially if your child hasn't experienced that permanent change in sleep. If the brain hasn't matured enough and circadian rhythmicity has not been achieved, you might find that napping is really, really hard to make happen predictably. You might also find that you'll only get 1 hour nap times max. You might find that your little one will literally nap for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, and then that's it. And you know what? That's fine. Shorter naps are actually, there's no evidence to suggest that longer naps are more beneficial to our children than shorter naps. As long as they're getting the sleep that they need when they need it, that's the main thing. I often say to parents as well, so trying to get your child to nap predictably when they're under 6 months can be really, really challenging. And looking at a clock on the wall or trying to stick to a strict nap schedule when they're under 6 months can be really, really hard. So I often say to mums, look at the wake window length and go by that to identify or to ascertain when your child should be sleeping. So let's say, for example, you've got a 4-month-old and the wake window length is around about 90 minutes. So for the first nap of the day, if they've woken up at 7 a.m, you want to be preparing them or having them ready to sleep by 8:30. So I would have recommended by about 8:10, 8:15, you start the pre-nap ritual, and then by 8:30 they're asleep. Then as the day progresses, you might find that wake window gets to 95 minutes, maybe even an hour, 100 minutes. So that's sort of an hour and 40 minutes. So again, pay attention to the wake window rather than the time on the clock, and look out for sleepy cues, because like I said, under 6 months, predictable napping according to a time on the clock is going to be really, really challenging. But if you're aware of your child's wake window, it'll be much easier to know when to settle them down for naps. 4 to 5 naps per day are normal. And for a child of up to 6 months, 4 to 5 hours of daytime sleep is the norm as well. You'll often find that your little one will only sleep for a period of 9 to 10 hours overnight and will have the majority of the rest of their sleep happening at various intervals during the day. You'll often find that naps on the go for under 6 months are the easiest to facilitate, but it is important that I let you know at this age, if they are able to facilitate naps, please do not let them nap past 2 hours. If they're napping for 2 hours, wake them up. If they're napping too long, you'll often find that the sleep distribution can sometimes throw nighttime sleep. So if they're getting too much sleep in the day, they'll then have more awake time at night, which I'm sure no parent wants. So if you have a little one under 6 months and they've been napping for 2 hours, wake them up. So as a final note, wake time watching or being aware of the awake interval when your little one is under 6 months is way more important than clock watching. So please know and understand that if you have a little one under 6 months, being aware of early tired cues, keeping an eye on their wake windows is really, really important. If they're napping for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, that's actually normal. Really inconvenient for us, especially when we've got other things to do, but it is normal. So please just make sure that you can make sure that they're getting their adequate amount of sleep during the daytime. So for a little one under 6 months, up to 4 or 5 hours of daytime sleep is needed. So you might find that they'll have sort of like 4 1-hour naps during the day, or they might have 2 1-hour naps and 2 90-minute naps. So as long as you're kind of keeping a journal, so you're aware of how much sleep that they're getting, try not to worry about when it's happening. Familiarize yourself with your little one's awake windows and look out for sleep cues. Now, if you've got a little one who is aged 6 to 9 months, which I'm guessing the majority of you who are watching this class have, this is when sleeps or naps during the day become a little bit more predictable and a little bit easier to facilitate. So I often find at this age, this is when they tend to be having 3 naps in a day. And the midday nap is usually the nap that needs to be the longest, and this is usually the nap that you'll notice gets the longest. This is the nap that you want to be the longest one. So I often find between the ages of 6 to 9 months, the morning nap should be between 45 minutes to an hour, no longer than an hour. The midday nap should be roughly between 90 minutes to 2.5 hours. And the afternoon nap, which is usually the shortest nap of the day, and the first one to go once they're getting ready to drop a nap, again, should just literally be a top-up nap. Shouldn't really be any longer than 60 minutes. It's also important to notice that that afternoon nap shouldn't happen too close to the end of the day. I often find with little ones at this age and stage, 6 to 9 months, their awake window can be as short as 1.5 hours, but it can be as long as 3.5 hours. So let's assume that your little one's awake window is 3.5 hours. So you want that last nap to end 3.5 hours before bedtime. So let's just say bedtime is at 8 p.m. That last nap has to be finished by 4:30 at the very latest. Anything later and it's going to push bedtime back. The total amount of daytime sleep for this little age is usually between 3 and 4 hours, and you'll often find that they'll have between 10 and 11 hours of sleep overnight. I find that this age, napping on the go becomes a lot harder to achieve. So again, if this is something that you're worried about, focus on the timing of naps and then work on the location of the naps later. So I often find that this age group, trying to keep the nap time or the nap space consistent works in your favor if they're refusing naps. But if you're finding actually there's 1 or 2 naps that I can facilitate on the go, by all means do that. At this age, looking at the clock sometimes can work quite well, and it's especially important for you to go by the clock in terms of the times that they're waking up first thing in the mornings, and their meal times if they're on solids, and their bedtimes. Those things need to be consistent. So try and be as consistent as you can with the time that you're starting the day in the mornings, your meal times, and your bedtimes. The times of naps can be a little bit more flexible. You're not at the stage as yet where you can go by the clock. There are times when you're still probably going to need to kind of look at your little one for sleepy cues, but you'll often find as the day progresses, again, that wake window gets longer and it gets a little bit easier to predict when a nap is going to happen.